Welcome back to the Human Perspective. As always, captioning will be up within 24 hours. This month, I'm focusing on the 40th anniversary of the signing of the regulations of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. My guest today is Eve Hill. Eve is currently a partner at the law firm of Brown, Goldstein and Levy. She is a well-known disability rights advocate, an expert on disability rights law, and a dear friend. Prior to joining the firm, Eve was the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice under the Obama administration. I'd like to welcome you, Eve. So, as an attorney, when you were going into the field, how did you decide to have disability as an area you wanted to focus on?
Well, I had a great plan. I started out as a natural gas contract attorney, which, as we all know, is the direct pipeline to civil rights law. And I was enjoying the work, and I decided I wanted to do some volunteer work. And I asked a partner what I could do, and he gave me a bunch of different options, and they were all terribly boring. Like I could analyze the insurance needs of a nonprofit. But one of them was that a new training was coming out on training lawyers to enforce the ADA, because the ADA had just been passed.
The Americans with
Disabilities Act had just been passed, and so I went to this training, and it was Heidi Feldblum, who's a hero of mine, and she taught me the ADA. And so I was on a path from then forward.
Yeah, I love to ask the question of how people got into the field, because there are always different answers. So Eve, you've done a lot of work in the area of education, and with a focus on Section 504. And I'm wondering if you could tell us how you think 504 has made a difference in the lives of children and university and students as a result of 504 and IDEA and ADA.
Sure. The 504 really opened the doors to the schoolhouse for kids with disabilities. Before 504, kids with disabilities were mostly sent to separate schools. We refer to it as the short bus. They all got on the separate bus and went away to their separate schools. And they were sort of
where I went.
Yeah, and they were sort of out of sight, out of mind. And those schools tended to teach to the mean, the middle of the road. So if you were extraordinary, you didn't get education that was focused for you. If you were lower than the mean, you didn't get education that was focused for you. They tended to be underfunded and limited classes and very, very limited extracurricular activities. So they weren't getting the same education as kids without disabilities, and they weren't learning from kids with disabilities. Kids without disabilities. So 504 brought kids with disabilities into the regular school system where they could get the same classes and the same extracurriculars and interact with kids without disabilities. And so if you think of Joe has an intellectual disability, and he would have been at this special school, which would have focused just on his intellectual disability, taught him some things, some life skills, basic stuff, but he probably wouldn't have had any athletic activities or social activities. And so you might never have known that he was really good with computers, or that he was really social and a good speaker, entertaining, or that he was a good athlete. But bringing kids back into the regular schools gave them all these options. And then 504 also said you have to accommodate them in the education. So teach them in a way that they can learn. So you might repeat things verbally that you wrote on the blackboard for Joe. And Joe would then have more options to explore his academic abilities. And that would also change the expectations for him. 504 would also say you have to assume that Joe's going to get a job after he graduates, because the separate schools didn't assume that.
Right.
They assumed they would get on benefits and we would really never see them anymore. So now the regular schools assume everybody's going to go on to more school or get a job, and they would assume that for Joe too, and try and prepare him for some job, hopefully recognizing his computer skills or his social abilities. So it was great for the students with disabilities when it works, when it's implemented. And then it was great for kids without disabilities, because they learned that disability is normal. People with disabilities are everywhere, and they're all different from each other, like we're all different from each other. So it's more natural to interact with people with disabilities, to expect them to be in your workplace, to expect to hang out with them, to expect them to be your neighbors. And so that's changed. And then I think it's changed education. So we learn by teaching the way Joe needs, where we say everything that we write down, and we figure out that, oh, the kid sitting next to Joe also learns orally. And so it's actually improving everybody's education, and that led to things like universal design for learning, which is how you teach more people in the ways they all get more information out of it.
And I think this is really important, and it's an issue not just in the United States, but around the world, because people are always asking, is there data out there which shows whether or not students with disabilities drag down students without disabilities? And the data in our country and other countries very clearly shows that, as you're saying, it's just the opposite.
Well, that's right.
That when teachers are learning how to work with diverse learners, it helps the entire class.
Right, and we're all diverse learners.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, really briefly, sorry we don't have a lot of time, but could you give us like a little example from the Olmstead Decision?
Sure.
What it is and why you think it's been beneficial to people in the United States.
So the Americans with Disabilities Act says you have to, it has an integration mandate. You have to serve people with disabilities right alongside people without disabilities. You can't send them to institutions unnecessarily. And the Olmstead decision was a Supreme Court decision that said, that's real, that has meaning, we mean this. That's what the law really means. And so that's led states to change their funding so they don't send people to institutions unnecessarily. Now, if you need health care for a disability, you can get health care for a disability in your community and continue to live at your house and continue to go to your job and so forth. So those are the kinds of things that it started out with. My work, we expanded it into employment because I mentioned sheltered workshops earlier, and that had been where we assumed people with disabilities would go. And they're just like institutions. So we took several cases that said, states, you have to apply the same approach to sheltered workshops. People with disabilities can work in regular jobs, getting real pay. We have to figure out where to put them, place them, support them, and let them have real jobs.
And I think, again, this is something that people can look into more in depth. Olmstead is Olmstead, and it's really made a major difference in the United States. You've been in this field now for 25 years. What do you see as some of the major changes that have been occurring in the area of civil rights with a focus on disabled people?
Well, some of the major changes, just the attitude change of people with disabilities. People are no longer willing to accept charity. Just doing it, allowing me into your business because you're trying to be nice. We have a right to be in your business. You've had 25 years to make your business accessible. So we're less patient now with inaccessible businesses or with attitudes that say, oh no, we can't have the service animal in here. And then there's also the development of the internet. More and more business and government services are now only online. And that's a great opportunity for people with disabilities who don't want to face accessibility barriers, but only if the websites are made accessible. And that's not terribly hard, but you do have to think about it and do it. So that's where a lot of work in the ADA is now.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about the University of California, Berkeley, and the situation currently going on there.
Well, UC Berkeley, in response to a Department of Justice letter finding that their online courses were not captioned, decided rather than make all those courses, provide captioning for all those courses, they would take a bunch of them down and just remove them entirely, which is a disappointing, I expect better, of Berkeley, of all places,
Right.
where Ed
I'm
Roberts...
a UC Berkeley graduate.
Yeah, where Ed Roberts and you had this great culture. So to do that is really stunning and short-sighted. It's not that hard to make things accessible. You're making this accessible, and Berkeley can do better. And so they're going to lose a lot of customers from that, and particularly I think they're going to lose a lot of the faith of the disability community.
Yeah, I have to say, as an alumni, I was really very disappointed because I've looked at Berkeley as an example,
Right.
and then to see this happening clearly puts disability in a different perspective.
Right.
And I'm hoping that other universities will continue to do what they should do and shame Berkeley into doing it the right way. So I'd like to thank you, and oh my goodness, again, the time is gone. I'd like to thank Eve for joining us today on The Human Perspective. And I'd like to thank you, our audience, for joining us this month for our discussions on Section 504. I'd like for the discussion to be continued in the comments section below. For the month of May, we're going to focus on youth with disabilities. What topics would you like to see us discuss and highlight? I look forward to our next conversation in 2 weeks. And please don't forget to share this video. And again, thank you very much, Eve, for joining us.
Thank you.